on today's Story Beat.
Continue to do what you're doing and your destiny will find itself. So that's what I have to say. Be bold and know that in your boldness has genius and your destiny will find itself. You may find yourself pivoting to something you didn't think you might end up doing, but that's the adventure of life.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, David Sharp, is a writer, performer, and spiritual teacher. Through his business, Power for Life Now, David produces and presents workshops, retreats, videos, music, and performances for personal and spiritual growth. David is an ordained Presbyterian minister and has worked as a pastor, university lecturer, and seminary professor. As a performer, David has sung, danced, and acted on Broadway, television, and film, and has been a talk show host. He's written for numerous publications and is an award-winning author with 4 books published, including Annie Ruth's Truths, Power for Life, I'm a Black Man, Who Are You?, and Voicemaster. I've read Power for Life and Annie Ruth's Truths and highly recommend David's excellent writing to you. His books are easy reading pleasures with positive, upbeat messages. He's also recently finished writing a new musical and is soon to publish an illustrated book of poetry. David and his wife, Dr. Janine Good Allen, run in-person and virtual retreats called Live Your Dreams and have recently completed building the Good and Sharp Studios, a campus for spirituality and the arts in Boulder, Colorado. David's a graduate of the University of Southern California, where he was a drama major in the School of Performing Arts. He's also earned a Master of Divinity degree, a Master's in Special Education, and a doctorate in ministry. For the record, David and I have been friends for a very long time, having met and worked together while we were both drama students at USC. By the way, David and Janine have very generously offered a free gift to anyone listening to this podcast. It's a roadmap to your creativity. To find the link to receive your free gift, please check out David's episode here at storybeat.net. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a truly great joy for me to welcome to StoryBeat today my friend, the exceptionally multi-talented Dr. David Sharp. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to see you. We haven't seen each other in a few years, and it's great to see you. So
Yes.
Let's go back in your history a little bit. How old were you when the showbiz bug first bit you, when you wanted to be a performer?
Well, it was later. It was probably my senior year of high school. But, when I was in my elementary school days, they picked me to be in plays because I was one of the smart kids. And it's not that I wanted to, but I remember playing Rumpelstiltskin in the 5th grade. And in the 3rd grade, my mother put me in a speaking contest and I won doing Rudyard Kipling's poem, If. And I actually still have the trophy from the 3rd grade, because I think there are threads that we can find in our lives that point to where we're going to go, even way before we see them consciously. So that stuff, I was the lead in the high school play as a senior. But even then, it was my senior year when I thought, oh, this is where I want to go. Because before that, it was physical education and even Spanish. That's what I put on my SAT test. But one night watching Johnny Carson's show, I saw Donnie and Marie Osmond sing. And I have a sister who's a year older, and we've been singing all of our lives. My dad was a pastor, so of course we sang all the time. And it never occurred to me that we could have a career specifically in show business. I mean, a lot of African-American singers come out of the church, but I was an athlete. So I got inspired in that moment. Like, I could actually go into this field. And my consciousness at the time had to do with social justice. My dad worked with Dr. Martin Luther King.
Wow.
And I actually went to his funeral when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
So I grew up with these men. Andrew Young wrote my recommendation for seminary. I grew up with these kinds of leaders and activists. And I wanted to, be an athlete, but I didn't really grow that much. And that night that I saw them sing, I went, oh, I could do that. I called my sister, who had just gotten married, called her up at midnight, mind you. She answered the phone and I said, you got to look at this, Donnie and Marie Osmond. And we could sing, we could become singers and actually do this. And she went, you called me to watch Donnie and Marie? And then she hung up the phone. Inspiration comes from wherever it comes from.
So the theater I think of it as a kind of a spiritual place in a weird way. It's not unlike some kind of a ministry of sorts. Do you think of the theater as a place where people learn things and grow from it?
I think that's where theater came from. It came from a spiritual arena. That's what I've learned and what I've studied and read, that it came out of, we know the Greek theater, but it came out of, and that's why they call it show business, to show people to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's what religious institutions in their best way do. And that's what show business does when it's doing its best. They're so close that there are some people who say to me, oh, you're a minister and an entertainer? Oh, I get it. And then there are people who say, how can you be a minister and an entertainer? And so there are some people that see their close relationship and others that don't.
Well, the times that I've seen preachers really go into town, they are putting on some kind of a performance, even if it's coming from, some higher place. But it's definitely out there. It's not quiet and sedate. It's really performing.
That is correct. And there's a really good reason for it. If that oratorical form came out of the expressions, of course, from Africa, but in American slavery, the slaves were tired. They had been working, and yet they were allowed to gather together on a Sunday, and people were tired, and people are still tired when they go to church. So sometimes you have to make things more alive. You have to dramatize things. You have to use your voice in very creative ways, or people will fall asleep.
Well, it's just in a weird way, it's similar to the opening of Act 2s of musicals, where you got to drag the audience back in again.
That's right. Exactly right. So there's so much, interplay between those two worlds.
So who were your, aside from Donnie and Marie, your earliest inspirations in theater, in performing? Who inspired you?
Yeah, it was my parents, but you grow up, you don't realize it at the time. My dad was a saxophone player, jazz saxophone player. He became a minister. He didn't stop playing. He was very creative, and my dad was a comedian. We would grow up with his dad jokes, but he was a comedian in his teenage years. It's the corniest jokes you ever want to hear. And then my mother was a lay English teacher who was a tap dancer. So we would have family jam sessions, with dad playing the sax, my mother tap dancing. We had tap shoes, and we tried to copy what she did. And we just thought it was fun. We had no idea. We would watch but we had no really, living in Texas and Georgia, we didn't have the concept of show business as a life we could live.
Well, the truth is there are actually very few people that I speak to in show business who have show business families. Most people come to it some way that's not from their family, or they may be encouraged or even discouraged, but nevertheless, they come to it on their own.
Exactly. And the church worlds that I grew up in were very creative, from the singing to, I was in a spoken word choir as a kid, where they lined us up in the steps, and it would be like a chorus, in a play. And then we would go back and forth with these poems, and it was part of our training, educationally and oratorically, to get us ready to be presenters. But as kids, we just were told what to do, and
So you grew up in a creative environment?
No doubt.
And do you think that part of your creativity is also spirituality?
Well, the two are married in my world. because we learned at a very young age, you create your life. And so when you make a commitment to focus on your spirituality at a young age, what you're actually learning is to think about how you're living, think about how you are creating your day to day. So it's not just art and singing and dancing and painting, it's how you speak to people. You're creating, we were taught you're either creating heaven or you're creating hell. By you doing what you say. You, in that moment, you're creating the world, your world. You're creating your world. So creativity was part and parcel of the spiritual understanding and the cosmology of how we grew up.
So then it's all of a piece to you, that the performing spirituality, ministry, creativity, it's all of a one bubble, I guess you'd call it, one piece.
That's correct. And that's, I mean, take it to the existential level. We live in the universe, one verse, it's one song, it's one, it's all. And so you can break it down, but you'll kind of always get back to it's all one. And this is why the best teachers of any spiritual tradition on the planet will eventually get to the point of love. It's all, love is all there is, or it's just about oneness. And can't we all be one? It's one. You can break it down. That's one of the things I love about what we can do with our free will, is we can analyze to the nth degree. And science teaches us that not atoms weren't the smallest things. You can get smaller and smaller and smaller. And you can dissect life that way too. And then you can build it back up to say, listen, at the end of the day, it's all about oneness.
Oneness. That's a very good way to think of it. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. So I'm glad you said that. I'm curious, in your book, Power for Life, you actually talk on numerous occasions about patience. How important is patience to being creative?
Man, you have touched on something. I just finished creating my first online class, and it's on patience. Now, the first sermon my father ever preached, I was 6 years old, was on patience.
Wow.
So there's that thread. I didn't even realize it by the time I created this class, but it all makes sense. And patience is a skill. I didn't have it really until I had kids.
Or me. I didn't have patience at all.
Yeah. And kids will kind of force you to grow. And one of those places is patience, because, they don't understand. You say do something and they just do what they do. You just start to develop this quality. What I've understood about patience is that the skill allows, it encompasses listening, it encompasses waiting, it encompasses trusting, it encompasses an amount of faith to wait. We live in a country that wants things now. It's hard for people to be patient, especially in the time that we live in. And if you don't get it now, it's hard to wait for it. But I have learned and found out from my own experience that it's one of the best qualities to live, because it allows you to watch and observe, take in. You can still respond, but you're not rushing. You're not hurried. You're not being lazy. It's a quality of being that ushers in peace.
Well, it's very difficult, I think, to have a career in the arts. I would think, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, difficult to have a career as a minister if you're not patiently growing who you are, as opposed to expecting it all to be there the moment you have left school in some way.
Well, there it is. And, of course, show business, especially in the movies, is hurry up and wait, right?
Hurry up and wait.
But coming out of USC, I knew that I was hitting the ground without any help.
That makes two of us. I had no help out in LA, none.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how naive I was, both coming into USC and leaving USC. You have to understand, I never read a book on acting in high school, and I never was told about acting classes. I just thought you get up and act, and that's what I did. So my first day of acting class as a freshman, we were doing these exercises, and I was like, exercises? What do you mean exercises? And then these names, the method and Stanislavski and all these, and that's like, again, my head was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I did not know that it was an art form that you could study, read about, and practice. I was so naive.
So what do you think were We were both there at the same time. I came in a little later. I'd been in school for 3 years prior to transferring into SC. You'd been there for a while. But what do you think were the most important lessons you learned while in school? What did you take away from there that you're still using to this day?
Oh, easily it's observing, it's watching people. And in my senior class, I went back to my freshman acting class, which actually several people did, to go back to the basics. And one of those basics is to learn how to watch. And I still do it. I will be in a grocery store and watch how people walk. And I can feel myself kind of walking like them. I can tell if somebody's foot is hurting, or if somebody had hip surgery, or their back is hurting. I watch people's faces. And one of the exercises we did was private moments when people think no one is looking at them. What do people do? They pick their nose, or their ears, or they do some quirky thing that they do when no one's watching. I still watch for those things. I watch myself too, but I love watching other people do that. So it builds a vocabulary of human nature, of what we do, of human behavior. That's probably the thing that I got the deepest, because it serves me well as a public speaker, as an observer of humanity, putting together sermons, telling people, sharing with people how we can be in the world and how to help us grow. So by specifically pointing out how people can get on your last nerve, and what do you do? Do you move your shoulder? You cock your head? Or, these human behaviors are vocabulary.
So the observation that you've made all these years as both an actor and as a minister, I assume that the observations help you to formulate what you're then going to minister to people.
Sure. I mean, you talk about patience, and my creative process when I'm developing a sermon is to sit and wait.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm sitting down and now I'm writing the sermon. No, sorry. To put it bluntly, God wants us to spend time in that space. And then what we call, revelation is ushered in. It's like you wait for it. It's different from writer's block, waiting to get, it's kind of the same, but it's like you spend time studying. So I have this way of creating a sermon. I read myself full, I think myself clear, and I write myself empty. That's a creative process that I use to create sermon. It takes about 8 hours. And I sit, and then at some point in time, there is this really palpable inspiration that comes in. And I know I'm in the zone, so to speak, to write not what I want to say, but what is calling me to say. I'm just an instrument. So like an actor, we're instruments.
So you alluded a moment ago to listening. That's part of an observational process, is to listen as well as to see, and I guess to feel and so on. Actors must listen, and that's an active thing, to listen, as opposed to hearing, which is autonomic. If we have hearing, we all hear without thinking about it, but to listen requires an action. And so I'm wondering how important as a pastor is listening.
Oh, when people speak, they sometimes are not saying what they really want to say. It's underneath, and you can hear that sometimes.
Subtext.
Yes. See, it's all there. It's really all there. So you listen to a person and you see the subtext, and it helps you ask the right question. And so active listening is expanding your consciousness to hear more than the words. It's to hear the tone, the melody of the words. It's to hear the loudness. It's to hear all those qualities. My other book, How to Be a Dynamic Speaker, captures all of those qualities of the human voice that we listen to. You look at body language also, and then you can begin to minister to the person, meaning meet them where they need to be met. What's going on, what needs to be addressed.
How long did you work at that before you felt like you had a handle on being able to observe someone in a relatively short period of time and figure out what the needs were? It wasn't immediate, was it?
It was decades.
Decades.
They say life is short, but I'm glad life is long enough to, I didn't realize that I was a teacher until I was 40 years old.
Well, you alluded to another thing that I know from teaching for 10 years is that one of the arts of teaching is asking the right questions.
Right. And I learned that from watching other teachers, great teachers, teach and ask questions that elicited a response you would never give just offering what's coming out of you yourself.
So let's talk for a moment about your writing, which I think is outstanding. As mentioned, you've
Thank you.
published 4 books with a musical and a book of poetry on the way. It seems to me that everything that I've seen of your work, it's all deeply spiritual in nature in one way, shape, or form. You're not just writing fluff. Your stuff is from the heart and it's very deep. Is that why you write, to spread that feeling of spirituality?
I did not know that I was going to be a writer. Maybe the first sign was at 6 years old. We were traveling from Denver to Dallas, and it was my first experience of racism. We didn't get served in a restaurant. My parents eventually explained what was happening. And I remember the feeling of coming down. And I was a smart little kid, and I wrote a 2-line poem, and it was, "Racism is no fun, and for me, it's just begun."
Oh, wow.
I know, right? My first song was at 14 years old, called "The World is a Rainbow." The world is a rainbow with colors that won't end. God intended them to be beautiful, but man took things in its own hand. People looked at the colors and thought it made them different. And it went on and on about racism. And I still listen to that song, which no one's heard. I go, I wrote my first song. That was like, why should a kid have to write a song like that? But I think it showed me that my consciousness was way ahead of where I was. So that's why I keep this 3rd grade trophy about speaking, and that's what I still am. I'm a speaker and a presenter about life. I teach people about life, and that sounds verbose in a way. And I remember calling my dad one day and say, "Dad, who are we as ministers to tell people how to live?" And he says, "David, people need to be told how to live."
Well, I think that's for sure.
And I do too.
And the world we're in today, we need that more and more, don't we?
We just need inspiration. One of the great theologians said, "There's more good in the world than evil, but not by much." And so the good people, quote unquote good, who shine their light, and we do the same thing in show business. The best movies, movies touch people. The best movies can touch you in the heart and get you to capitulate or transform something about yourself. And that's what I love about theater.
So you speak also,
and that's why I'm writing.
Well, I was going to say, you speak also through your writing, don't you?
Absolutely. I had a mystical experience at 18 that showed me to be a writer, and I ignored it because I wanted to perform. And then when I was 30 years old, I almost drowned right after seminary, and I survived. Literally, I saw myself moving away from my body, and
oh my,
I could look back and see myself in the water. And I chose to come back, and then I had an experience that it's one of those things you don't have to prove it to anyone. You just know that God spoke to me, and we talked about my life path, and it was very clear. I didn't have to sing, dance, act, or even preach. I had to write. And so if I gave up everything, it would be writing, because that's the calling, the deepest calling of my soul. Now that's writing songs, poems, books, plays. It's writing. I have this ability to gather life together and put it on a page. A lot of people can do that, but I'm very conscious of doing it in a way that hopefully expands the consciousness and deepens the soul of people, so that they understand that we're all created beings in a created world, and we can get better as an earth.
Well, I think that what you produce is outstanding and very smart and very helpful to people.
Well, that's it. And being helpful and useful is really the bottom line. And it's not like I want to write high intellect stuff. I want to reach sort of the everyday person who wants to be spoken to in normal language.
What do you think writing and then reading do that merely speaking cannot?
I've heard many speakers speak, and after they speak, you go, "But what did they say?" So they're very skilled at emotion and dramatics, but the content is specious and doesn't say much to help people. So I've always said that I wanted to both have content that was useful and, dare I say, powerful, enough for people to think about and just go, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that," and also communicated in a way that fits the audience, because, in some audiences I need to be more intellectual. In some audiences I need to be more dramatic and more expression. So you have to know your audience also.
Do you gear what you're doing with an audience based on what you think their needs are? In other words, if an audience maybe isn't an intellectual audience, but needs something a little more down to earth, are you able to just gear yourself toward that?
Well, there you go. And this is one of the things that I love about the creative process as a writer and a speaker. You write, like I said, you read yourself full, think yourself clear, write yourself empty, you're ready. And then on that, you get up there, and then it can all just go away because the audience is saying, I need something else. But you're prepared. That's the thing, you're prepared. And so you're prepared to go off script. You're prepared to ad lib. So I really enjoy that. Some people are really afraid of that. But I've learned to allow yourself the freedom to be guided in the moment. There's a level of trust. It comes with experience, and it comes with education, and it comes with practice and failing many times, by the way.
Well, that's how everybody learns and grows, is by failing first. Nobody hits it right out of the park. George Bernard Shaw once said, "A man who makes no mistakes makes nothing at all." So there you have it.
There you have it.
You have to fail in order to grow, because that's how you learn.
There it is. And failing is part of being human, and it's, picking yourself up and learning the lessons. I love that, to grow to the point where you can admit, a mistake, and approach the person or the situation, whether you need to ask for forgiveness, or I'm sorry, or I apologize, or, can it something I can do to make up to you, but to own that quality. Or even when you just disappoint yourself, to say, okay, it's just, I can still move on. And, it goes into patience. I remember many times where I've lost my patience before I developed more patience. And it's like, okay, so this is why I'm glad life is long enough. I know we can die at any time, but I always say any of us we're old enough to die, but we're also young enough to live a lot longer, even now. So
even now, speak for yourself, even though we're the same age. Do you write every day?
In a manner of speaking, my brain is always observing and thinking, and I keep a recorder by my bed, because I wake up in the middle of the night with these ditties or these dreams or these thoughts. And so if I don't write every day, I'm observing something every day. I'm processing something. That's the work that I do with my life. Yes, I know how to take a vacation and I think about work, and I take breaks during the day. But with the businesses that I have and the work that we're doing, so the answer is yes and no. I tend to both have a schedule and not be a slave to the writing schedule. The nighttime tends to be full for me. I think that comes from my days in show business. After a show, you're wired, you go out. And I still have, the night still brings me a lot, because in the day you get interrupted with phone calls and people, but at night people are asleep. I'm still awake. I'm a night owl. I get a lot of work done.
I think what you're saying about when you're thinking about not writing every day, just because you're not putting pen to paper or typing on a computer or typewriter or whatever, that doesn't mean you're not writing in your head.
Absolutely. And if it comes to paragraphs, or I will stop and record something, or stop and write a sentence down. And when I haven't done that, I've lost some thoughts that could still fill in my head.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
You got to get it down somehow. I mean, a lot of writing teachers will tell students you need to carry some kind of a recording device with you, whether it's a pad of paper and a pencil, or whether it's your phone, whatever you're recording into. You need some kind of recording device with you, or you will lose things over time. So I want to spend a little time talking about this absolutely wonderful little book called Annie Ruth's Truths. First of all, tell the listeners, who is Annie Ruth? And then why did you decide to write a book about all of these incredible pieces of wisdom?
So this is a process of at least 3 decades. My mother, is an African-American woman from the South, literally country Mississippi. And they have a way of being. It's a folk wisdom. A lot of people didn't go past the 6th grade. My mother came off the farm. where we were slaves, several generations back, they actually took us to the land where the slave owning family a few generations later is still there. So I got this understanding of the culture my mother came from. And there were relatives still living on the land, like after slavery, then sharecropping, and this wisdom, this, I would say, uneducated wisdom, but doesn't mean that people aren't wise.
Oh, I think that your mother has extraordinary common sense, what people used to call horse sense.
Yeah, exactly. And my mother finished high school, didn't get to go to college, but she's the smartest one in the family. And it was one day, maybe 30 years ago, and my mother came out with something, and I was like, Mom, where'd you get that? She goes, I don't know, it just comes out. And she goes, you grew up, my mother used to say stuff like that. And I said, I'm just going to write this down, because that was like amazing. And then
this is decades ago.
Yes. And so, I'm off to college, right? And then I would go home, and maybe once my mother would say one of these things, like, well, excuse me, I just got to write that down. Well, years went by. I collected them. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just got to keep this. I might remember one and say it to somebody at some point. And then, this book came out a couple of years ago. And at one point I said, how many of these do I have? And I looked, and there were 82 of them. And then I realized that my mother was 82. So I took that as a sign. It's time to see if anyone's interested in publishing this. By the time we got the book published, there were 111 of these quips, and I have explanations of them. Yes, Annie Ruth is my mother, and her truth is why the book is called Annie Ruth's Truths, because there ain't nothing like Mama saying.
No. Did you interview her for the book at all?
Oh yes, I have recordings of my mother, videotape of my mother talking about the book, which I've included on Facebook, and social media. So you can probably still find it. But yeah, my mother is 88 years old now. And she still comes out with these. I'm still writing things down. I don't know if there's going to be enough for a second book, but there will be enough for a revision.
How much of what she has said over time do you think has informed who you are?
Oh,
lots.
I mean, your parents are, for better, for worse. My mother is, I call my mother, she's a resurrection woman. She brings people to life. And she does it with her personality and her wit and her precociousness and her Southern folk way of speaking into people. And she does it with love, mind you. It's tough love, but it's love nonetheless. And she doesn't care if you're the mayor of Atlanta or, whatever your high position is. My mother does not care. She will speak into you and say something and get you to go, yeah, get off your high horse and speak into you, and people love it.
Well, it's
authentic.
It just leaps off of the page who she is. Her character, who she is clearly jumps off the page right at you, the way that she phrases things and the way that you've captured them. Did dealing with your mom create any special challenges for you as the author of the book?
I would say no. My mother was, I think people want to be seen. And once my mother knew I was collecting these, she would offer more. She was more conscious of, my son is collecting these things that I have in me. And so, I'd go back and she says, write that down. She'd say something. I go, Mom, write that one down. So my mother's picture is on the book, and I send her half the royalties because it wouldn't be a book without her.
Do you have one or more favorite observations in the book?
Oh man, they come so randomly, but one of the ones that come right away is, the window is clear on both sides. And it's, it's like, I see what you're doing. You think I don't see what you're doing? No, the window is clear on both sides. So if somebody says, I see what you're doing, but I see what you're doing. The window is clear on both sides.
All right. So I'm going to throw 3 or 4 of them at you that I thought were just fantastic. And you tell the listeners what you think they mean, because I'm not sure I know exactly what they mean. Nobody likes a bone but a dog.
People want the meat. People are cheap, skimpy, and they will give you as less as they can. So, when you're working, when you're offering some food, don't give the skimpy stuff, give the meat. Nobody likes a bone but a dog. Give me some good stuff, give me the fat.
She says, take the current while it serves.
Ooh. So this has to do with the river that runs through the countryside, and the river, depending on the wind and the water and the seasons, you have current eddies, currents, and sometimes it flows slow in the summer and faster when it's springtime. So you take the current while it serves, meaning go with the flow while the flow is going, because it ain't always going to be going the way you want it to. Life is up and down, it's fast and slow, and you better take the current while it serves. So it's a recognition that in life, it's a spiritual concept, frankly. It's of recognizing that life is not just about us doing things in life. It's about what happens to us. And it's about the dance of flowing with life. It's, call it the zone. You take Goethe's statement, boldness has genius. So when you do something, you might create the current yourself. You might create your own luck. Go with that luck while it's serving. Yes, and recognize it and keep going until it empties out.
Is it similar to the more colloquial phrase, make hay while the sun shines? Is it similar?
Sure, it's the same thing.
Same thing. So she also says, you're not so slick that you can't stand another greasing.
That is one of my all-time favorites. It has to do with people who think that they are slicker than you are. Not that you're slick, just like people who are slick and they want to cheat you out of something. Or even a politician who's doing some underhanded things and then get found out. And so, they're saying is, no, you're not so slick. You can't use another grease, and you ain't that slick. We see what you're doing because the window's clear on both sides.
So she's very able to combine these various phrases.
Absolutely. And I do that in the book also. I have phrases that go back to other phrases. And so you could actually create a language culture of using these beautiful folk sayings that
so I say to the listeners, this is a very dynamic, short book, very easy to read, very easy to grasp, and I highly urge you to get it just to add some color into your own life, because these phrases are fantastic. Last one I'll ask you about is, if you can't be good, be careful.
Oh, well, so that has to do with sex. And I think you could go back to Mae West on that one. It can't be good, be careful. I mean, but my mother was like, she speaks into people like, okay, if you can't be good, be careful now. And my mother would point that finger. You know what I'm talking. You know what I'm saying.
Well, Mae West would have said, famously, she said, when I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better.
That's the one. It's a riff on that.
All right. So I want to speak for a little bit about Power for Life. Tell the listeners what Power for Life is and what its purpose is.
Power for Life is a book of inspirational guidances for each day of the year. So there are 365. And this came about as an exercise that my wife and I were doing in the morning. We would ask a question: God, how would you want me to live into this day? How would you want me to, what would you want me to do or say today? And, or God, how would you guide me today? And then, we would take a moment and then we would write this question with our right hand and switch the pen to our left hand. The right hand accesses the left brain, the left hand accesses the right brain if you're right-handed. It's the other way around if you're left-handed. And what happens is with the left hand, it releases you from the thinking brain and you become more intuitive. And my wife noticed that my answers were coming out like poetry. Hers were coming out like a grocery list. Do this, do that, do that. And mine were coming out more like sentences and prose. And she goes, you need to keep that. And I went, okay. So I started keeping them. I didn't know what was going to happen with them, but I kept them. And then my wife, again, she's brilliant. She made a suggestion that I see how I lived the guidance and write an evening reflection on how did I do living that guidance. So that's the book, Power for Life. Power for Life is a phrase I've used for decades. I've always liked the term power for life because somewhere in my psyche, I've recognized that I need power for life, whether it's power to deal with the racism that I've had from the South, leaving the South, or the power I need as a short person to like stand tall. I mean, it goes into all the things that I've had to challenge me and that I've dreamt into. So I need the power, and the power is the ability to make happen. So I love this phrase, power for life, the ability to make happen the kind of life you want.
How important are these meditations for being creative? How important is it for creativity?
It goes back to creating your life or your personhood every day. You really do. And the thing about it is they help us grow as in our personal lives. And what I mean by growth is not becoming smarter, but becoming wiser, becoming more kind, more patient, having more peace, having more joy, having more goodness, meaning you do things for people not to get something back, but you do it out of service. Gentleness is a huge quality that I've grown into. I've recognized it as a really powerful quality to be gentle. And so this book recognizes these qualities, and they help us continue to become and grow into the potential of our humanness. And what I've noticed is that it forms an attractiveness. People want to be around you. People respond to you differently. They may not know what's happening in the moment, but they experience your kindness, your gentleness, your humbleness, your goodness, your energy. It's all energy. So the light literally, is through your words, and you can bless people just by saying hi, with a smile. It goes back to what Maya Angelou said. At the end of the day, it's being able to say good morning.
At the end of the day to say good morning.
Oh, or in the morning, say good morning to your neighbor.
I think it's fun to say good morning in the end of the day.
It's morning somewhere.
It's always morning somewhere. So that book then leads you to a lot of what you do now with Power for Life Now, with the retreats, yes?
Right. The retreats with my wife, Dr. Janine Goodallen, we met in graduate school. And this business we have is to help people live into their dreams. We were both, we both got our doctorates in ministry. We were teaching at a seminary. The seminary closed. We decided, let's do something where we don't lose our jobs anymore. We became entrepreneurs. We went to business school to learn how to put our gifts and educational skills and talents online, which is what we're doing. We have live retreats, in-person retreats, and we have virtual retreats and workshops. And so, yes, this book leads into what my wife and I both do, which is to help people get past their limitations, their fears, in order to get closer to living the dream that they have deep inside.
Are these retreats religious in a sense, or are they more down to earth?
Yeah, they're not religious. I'm not really a religious person anymore. I'm spiritual. I've grown. I mean, I'm not saying it served its purpose, but I've expanded. I'm not pastoring a church. I'm teaching people about spirit. I teach spirituality. I went to an ecumenical school with Buddhists and Muslims and Wicca and even atheists. And so I've always enjoyed the creativity of all paths and how people perceive life. It's never bothered me at all. I think that's part of why I went into the creative industries, because when I was in college, I didn't go to church. I studied Zen. I went to the ashrams. What is everybody else doing on this planet? So this business that we're doing is not religious. It's very spiritual, and you can separate it out into the spirit of a person. What's calling you? That word. What's the yearning in your deep inside of you that you're afraid to say or afraid to do or think you can't do? You're too old, or you don't have the skills, or you don't know where to start. Well, we help people announce it, own it, and make a plan to help them move that way. And we've had some incredible results with the work that we're doing. And yes, it's part of, you could say ministry, but it's just where we are both now.
It sounds like you're helping people get unstuck.
That's a great way to say it. And so many people are stuck.
People are stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. which goes back to, my father's wisdom. People need to be told how to live. That doesn't mean, like a cop. It just means, who do you allow to speak into your life? I don't let everybody, I don't listen, I don't take everybody. That's why I used to take it like a grain of salt. If it works for you, if you think it works for you, take it in. So people who come to us either hear about us word of mouth, find us online, or have been to something else we've done. And we have people from their 30s to people in their 70s who still want to do things, and they're doing them. And this will be our third retreat. And so our track record is, we're still young at it, but we don't plan to retire anytime soon.
You're helping people find inspiration for themselves in their own lives.
Yes. And we're actually helping people find power to move forward toward those things that they feel most like they still want to do, that's unfulfilled in them.
So how much of your training as a performer come into play when you're conducting a retreat? You've learned how to memorize lines and to move gracefully like a dancer and to speak to people and to perform. How important has that training been to the way that you conduct the retreats?
It's amazing. Like I said, I think sometimes our souls are way ahead of our human consciousness. So all my acting classes, for instance. So I have over here on my desk my dissertation, and inside it are all the exercises I learned in acting class. And I knew that there was a spiritual component to them. And so I mined the exercise, and then I created a course in seminary for students called Acts of the Spirit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we use these acting exercises to open the heart or a problem that people were bringing. And, in acting class, you have these scenes, two people get up and you create the scenario, and you do the scene until everyone recognizes the moment. And they go, okay, that was it. What is that? It's the moment. It's the moment the heart opens. It's the moment that's real, that's authentic, that gets to the core of humanity, whether it's pain or joy or rage or forgiveness or some moment that's past the words, that's into that which we can't see except to feel with our spirits. And that's one of the things that came out of my acting classes is I literally use them in our work now. I use my tap dancing. In college, Al DeCio was my tap teacher, and I performed with him a lot. We still tap dance. That's how I met my wife, through tap dancing. And we use tap dancing now in something we call art as meditation. We have 40 pairs of tap shoes. We put people in tap shoes who've never tapped. It's not about that. It's about making sounds with your feet. Everyone can stomp. Everyone can walk with tap shoes on. Everyone can jump. So you can make sounds, and everyone can go without knowing what they're doing. So we've discovered an artistic, fun way that's very transformative and can open up some powerful emotions that people can then go through, and we transform that with perhaps lighter taps. So I'm the guide in that, but the point is I've been able to translate tap dancing from performance to a teaching tool. The other thing is, behind me here in my office are toys. I collect toys. So I have these, and then I have more over here. And in these cabinets are toys and books. And that's the crux of it for me. Toys and books, the intellect and play. That's the creative formula for me. And I use these toys in our work. People will come and I have them pick a toy that speaks to them. And when I discovered this for myself, I had all these toys in my garage, and I walked in and I went, what am I going to do with all these toys? I didn't realize. And I heard, use them to teach. And I went, okay, great. I don't know where that voice came from, but okay. So I pointed to a toy. What does this toy have to say? And I got the message. And so now I use these toys as a teaching tool about life.
What are people to expect when they come? They're going to get up and do activities. It's not just a lecture and a seminar. You're actually doing things in the retreats.
Oh yeah, we think that moving the body moves your life. So nobody likes to sit in a lecture, these days, and it's an audience participation, very active. That's why we built the spiritual center, a dance studio, art studio, and a recording studio on our property to build this little campus. And then we're in the oasis now. This is my office, and so it's yes. You're going to come and you're going to sing. You're going to proclaim something. We have a stage where you get up and pronounce your dream to the world. We're going to take you into our dance studio. We call it the floor, and put you in these shoes and help you address the limitations. We take you into the art room. We call it the forest because the ceiling is just beautiful forest tapestry. And I call the recording studio the cave. And so all of these tools, we call this the oasis, because the oasis is that water in the desert. And that's a lot what is happening here. People come from the desert of their lives and they get watered by the work that we do.
Do you think of yourself in doing this as a storyteller that guides?
Well, I certainly have used stories to guide. For instance, I think it clicked with me from when I was 15. I was actually here in Colorado visiting my grandmother. I was 15 years old and I was running around, with all this energy. And my grandmother, it was bothering her that I couldn't be more still. She said to me, go sit in front of that tree and ask that tree how it can stand still for so long. Now you see where my mother gets.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, what? She goes, sit there and ask that tree. And so what's that? That's the cosmology from Africa that got into my grandmother, from the slave who made it all across, for all the people that survived for me to be here. And my grandmother has that legacy of that kind of folk wisdom that comes from deep somewhere. And I learned that nature speaks to us, that nature has things to teach us. You can learn from a rock, you can learn from a tree, you can learn from anything in nature. Everything speaks.
In developing the various retreats that you do, did you come across any unexpected twists and turns along the way? What surprised you along the way?
From the retreats?
Yes, that in your development of it, as you were creating, because we're talking about creativity and you're creating the retreats themselves. What along the way surprised you that you went, wow, that's not where we expected this to go?
Sometimes the whole is the sum of the parts are greater than the parts themselves. And I think the first realization was, it works. We don't have to fool anybody. We're actually doing it's like you're doing this venture. It's like, is this going to work? Put people in tap shoes. So that's a surprise right there. The fact that you create the trusting environment where people try something that's not comfortable for them, that they've never done, and they trust you. And I think, I'm getting goosebumps, because that is where change happens. So once we realized this, put people in tap shoes, because we love to tap dance, but putting people in tap shoes for art as meditation, to allow meditation to happen with this artistic tool called a tap shoe, was an incredible, beautiful surprise at how powerful it was and how powerfully people changed because of that tool.
I think that's it's truly unique. I've never heard of anything quite like what you're talking about, and it sounds like it would be a lot of fun. How many, is it days to do this? What is it, 1 day, 4 days? How long do they take?
The retreat is 4 days, and we take a couple of hours to do this one exercise where we put people in tap shoes, go through this process, talk about the process, and the group then helps transform the pain into power. And to watch it happen, people get outside of themselves and they become more creative, and they learn that whether you're 70, 50, whether you've never drawn a picture or danced at all, or whether you've never done what's really calling to you. We have a person in her 70s who wants to be a painter, and she was always told, you artists don't make money. She became a teacher. Now she's painting and she's so happy. We have a guy who's 30. He wants to be a TV writer. He was always told, you can't make money as a writer. You're not a writer. But the calling never left. And we gave him this opportunity with us. And now he's written a television show that has won several awards all over the country. Of course, he's now trying to pitch it to HBO and, all the streaming services. But sometimes people need help. We all need assisted living at times.
Even young people need assisted
Even-
living occasionally.
Exactly.
I have to ask you briefly about your Broadway experience. You were in a show on Broadway called OK, and in it with you was Tamara Tooney, who also has been a guest on StoryBeat. So, and she's a fantastic, fantastic person. Also in the show is the sublime Brian Stokes Mitchell, who I've seen a number of times on stage. I don't know him personally, but I've seen him a number of times. But most importantly, the show was produced by this legendary guy named David Merrick. What was your experience like in the show itself? But more importantly, how was it to work with David Merrick, who's had all kinds of crazy things said about him over many years?
Yeah, it was a hard thing, because they took a 1926 Broadway show that won the Tony Award as best show on Broadway in 1926, OK. K is the name of a woman, OK, and redid it as an African-American musical. But David Merrick didn't let us be Black. And what I mean by that is, we would be on stage and working things out, and and the director was like, yeah, you guys do something, and then something would happen. And I remember the day, one of us went, "Amen, brother," and somebody else went, "Hallelujah." Somebody, and David Merrick was in the audience, and he stopped, and he says to the director, why are they saying amen and hallelujah? What? And we all realized in that moment that he didn't understand our culture. And we all realized that the show was in trouble, because if you're going to take a white show, make it a Black show, let it breathe the culture. He thought, put Black people in it, and it's a different show. No, well, you have to let us be Black. The other thing that happened in that show was the rich people in the show were light skinned, and the peons were darker skinned. And we realized there was this color gradation happening in our show. We all recognized it, and we thought, oh my God, it's so subconscious. He doesn't even realize what's happening. And the show did not survive. We ran for a couple of months, and he fired the first person that was hired to be the lead female. He thought she was actually too dark. And we brought some people who were lighter skinned, and we thought, oh my God, they're bringing this person in. And then we saw them. We thought, it's never going to work with this. Oh, this is just a mess. And it was a mess. The show stopped we opened the show, stopped for a month. We came back and opened again. I think it's one of the few shows that stopped. We were for a month, then we stopped, and then we came back and ran for another month. And that was it. It was sad.
Did anything that happened in that experience stay with you in terms of the way that you've performed and acted the rest of your life and career?
Yes. And this is what I mean. You can do things in life, and then things happen to you. That was 1991 or so. Things happen to you. It's like my first role as an actor. I was doing a TV show, and I was rope climbing, and I had to do it over and over and over so I could get the camera shot. And then the director said, okay, so man, are you tired? And I said, yeah, I'm a little bit tired. And then he brought in another actor, and they actually did the shot. And when the show came on TV, it opens with a close-up of that actor and going up the rope. That should have been me. From that point, I went, oh my God, you don't say no. It was a variety show. Yes, I can do it again. I must have done it 10 times or so to get the right shot. So with OK, it was a reminder that, yes, you have power. You can do some things, but other people have power too. And other people can do things too. And, these things sometimes collide, and people don't get what they want. I've been in other shows like that too. I'm sure most actors have gone through something where they...
So that's part of the linkage of your life, that you learn that lesson early, and then more things happen in time that you have learned that you no longer do those things the same way. You do them differently, or improve on them, or maybe not improve on them and learn more.
Yes. And I think this is the dance of life, at least for me. I was 18 years old, thought I was going to be one thing. Life pivoted, and I went to seminary 4 years after college because I didn't like what I saw in the business as far as opportunity. And coming from the background I came from with social justice, I realized I don't have to do this. I don't have to be in this business. I still can act, sing, dance, and take it with me wherever I go. I don't have to be in Hollywood. So I took it with me to seminary. So I became the tap dancing preacher. I became the preacher who, I remember speaking at an occasion for the NAACP. in this lecture. I tap danced, I sang, recited my own poetry, and then I, of course, the content. And the lady stayed afterwards, and she says to me, when nobody else, she goes, "I'm staying here because what you did up there, I know takes a long time, because each one of those things you did well. So how old are you?" So I realized that she got it. She got like the skills of a performer, whether it's innate or developed. So there are some people that recognize the developed talent.
Well, I have been having the most marvelous conversation for a little more than an hour now with my friend David Sharp, and it's just been a joy to talk to you. We're going to wind the show down a little bit, and I'm wondering, you've been around a long time, you've done a lot of things, and you've met a lot of people and had experiences. Do you have an oddball, weird, offbeat, quirky, or just plain funny story that you can share with us?
Absolutely. So this has to do with my dance background. I was preaching a sermon in my church in San Francisco, and I had my robe on, and I don't stay behind the pulpit. I go down to the audience. I went down, toward the people, and I stepped on the back of my robe, and it pulled me backwards. It literally pulled me down. And in that moment, talk about a creative moment. At that moment, I was like, and it pulled me down, and I was like, and then I went into the splits, and I went, life tries to pull you down, but if you have faith, you can rise back up. and I did myself, rose back up, and then I went to the splits again and came back up. And of course, the church saw me get pulled down, but they also saw the creativeness to, in the moment, ad lib, or what they call it in comedy. You do, the impromptu. You just, in the moment, you change it up, and I was able to change it up. That has to do with my creative, I would say, the experiences that I've had as an actor, as a creative, to improv, and to in the moment. And we all, the church hooted and hollered after that happened, because it could have been like, oh my God, what happened? But no, I kept going, and they understood. And I think what they understood was that life does pull you down, but there is a way to pull yourself back up and keep moving. And I think that was more powerful than anything else I said in the sermon.
Well, you had the experience of, the show must go on. So you knew you had to keep doing it. And so you just figured out in the moment how to do it.
Yes.
I love it. All right. So that's wonderful. So last question for you today, David. You've given us just a ton of incredible advice along the way, but I'm wondering if you have a solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to people who are just starting out, either in show business or in ministry, or both, or those maybe that are in a little bit, but trying to get to that next level where you might advise them how to get there.
I do, and it's be bold. Be bold. And what I mean by that is, here we go with the storytelling. Maya Angelou spoke at the University of Berkeley, and I was in seminary, and I went to hear her speak, and I was so inspired. And she had a book signing thing after this lecture, and I went, and there are 300 people in the room, and I'm standing in line for her to sign the book, and I finally get up, and maybe 4 people in front of me, I get this hit that I should recite one of my poems when I go up to her. And then I got so scared. Oh my God, no, I can't be doing that. And of course, my heart was beating and it wouldn't go away. I got up to Maya Angelou. She was sitting behind the desk, and I knelt down and I went, "Maya," and she goes, "Yes, darling." And it's this poem from this book, "I'm a Black Man, Who Are You?" And I said, "I'm a man. I'm a Black man." And she goes, "Yes, you are." And then I went on to recite a whole next paragraph of the poem right there in the room. She was so impressed, probably by my boldness, but it did have, of course, this poem, it's doing a lot of things. She stood up, stopped the room, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to hear this young man. I want you to do what you just did for me." And I did it for the whole room.
Wow. Yeah.
And after that, I was able to talk to Maya about my path. And she said, I can't take your writings, but I can tell you this: continue to do what you're doing and your destiny will find itself. So that's what I have to say. Be bold and know that in your boldness has genius, and your destiny will find itself. You may find yourself pivoting to something you didn't think you might end up doing, but that's the adventure of life.
That is fantastic advice. That's just sort of everything. That's how people actually succeed, is by being bold and finding their destiny. David Sharp, this has been so much fun for me. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this, and I've learned so much from you today, and I'm just grateful for you spending the time, and you're giving us all of your wisdom and energy, and I appreciate it greatly.
This has been fun, and that's one of my favorite words. And thank you for the opportunity.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Story Beat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.